Thank you for being here and proud to welcome Janine Coulter.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Okay. Hi, you guys. Lisa, thank you so much for your kind words. I didn't know she was going to introduce me, and I really, really, really appreciate it. It's been wonderful to have you in class. The women that I have in class, many of whom are actually here tonight, which is amazing. Hi, Monica, are like my life's blood. And it's, hi, Andrea. Look, see, all these women from my spin classes are like in the room, and this is what you get when you join a Sin Studio. Anyways, I'm super happy to be here. Thank you guys so much for having me. Before we get started, so anytime I teach a spin class, this is probably going to be a little bit different, but before we get started, I always ask everybody, and they groan and they hate it, but they do it anyways, mostly to cheer. And I know that seems a little bit weird, but I want to cheer in here because I want to get the energy cranking. So, how are you? Okay. That was actually like better than some of my classes, so that is awesome. Hi, like Lisa said, my name is Janine, and I am so honored to be here. I'm so happy to be here. I also love your campus. I love Cal State San Marcos. Like, it's the cutest. There's like the northeastern vibe to the buildings, but there's a community atmosphere that makes it feel more intimate, and I just love it. Like, anytime I've driven over here to speak with Lisa or check it out, I just love being here. In fact, so I always used to say that if I could go back and like redo my life, knowing what I know this second, if I could go back and be 16, like what would I do different? And I've always said that I would go to college in San Diego and work in the gas lamp and be a bottle girl, because those chicks make bank, and I totally could have done it back then. And I would have invented spin, which was not like a thing yet when I was in college. It was not a thing. And so I would have gone to school in San Diego, I would have invented spin, and I would have started the first spin studio. And instead of going to like USD or UCSD, which is what I would have said, I would have gone to Cal State San Marcos. And I spent like a lot of time thinking about how I would redo my life, a lot of time, which is why I had that like exact plan. And the reason I spent a lot of time doing that is that it definitely looked from the outside, anyone that knew me or to me, as though I should redo my life. For many, many years, I had made like a complete mess of everything. And I think what made it harder for people that knew me and for me is that like I didn't start that way, you know? I started with every like advantage and opportunity that somebody could have. So I'm from a little town in Georgia called Peachtree City, which is as cute as it sounds. It's like a bunch of golf courses put together, and we actually like ride around on golf carts to go places. And everybody's dad worked for Delta Air. It's like Pleasantville, that movie with Reese Witherspoon. It was like Pleasantville, for real. And my dad was a pilot, worked for Delta. My mom's a social worker, and my parents are amazing people. They were in the home as I was growing up. They loved each other. They loved me. They loved my brother. And they were so good at, I recognize now, they were so good, not just at supporting me, but they like hyped me up. Like anything I had interest in, they told me I was amazing at. And one of the things that they did all the time was tell me how smart I am, how smart I was, how smart I was. And I was pretty smart. And they did all the things, you know, like I got the SAT tutors and I took AP classes and I was on this track and I did really well on my SATs, which is something that I have held on to for a long time. But I did really well on my SATs. And my goal was, I did very well academically. My goal was I wanted to be either the first woman president of the United States or a Supreme Court justice, one of those two things. And I was like on track for that. I was really going to do that. So I was going to go to college in DC, go to law school, come back. Teresa's nodding, like checks out, right? This is like, I think how they do it. Come back, be a lawyer, get involved in politics at the local level and like go from there, which I think is a legit plan. I think that's like how you would do it. I think that's how those guys do it. And that was my plan. And I was on that track and everything was great. And then my senior year, and I got an early admission, which is a good thing. My senior year of high school, my parents split up, seemingly out of nowhere. Of course, something like that is never actually out of nowhere, but it definitely felt that way to me. And obviously no one likes when their parents get divorced. But I didn't just like not like when my parents got divorced. I lost my mind. Like I completely lost my mind. I was actually thinking earlier, like, how do I describe this? And I thought of the Miley Cyrus video, The Wrecking Ball, where she comes in on like the wrecking ball. Basically, like if this was my life, I came in, but instead of a wrecking ball, it was me in a 1990 Honda Accord, like chain smoking cigarettes with like Chick-fil-A cups everywhere. And I just smashed into like everything good in my life, you know, and just destroyed it the best that I could. And I was already early admission to that school, so I did still go. Based on my senior year, I probably wouldn't have got in, but I'd already gotten in. So I went, and the sadness about, you know, my parents splitting up followed me, of course. But what really started to happen, and like this is important, and for those of you that like read the brochure ahead of time and know, I'm a like gnarly bad drug addict, like live outside, use needles, drug addict in recovery, but it's like in my DNA. And addiction, I've come to learn, is a set of like characteristics that are present long before somebody drinks or uses. And one of those characteristics is this feeling that the rules don't apply to me. And I definitely felt like the rules didn't apply to me. And when I got to college, college is harder than high school, which I was not expecting, which seems like it would have been obvious, but I was not expecting. And in high school, I hadn't had to study like as hard, and I would still get a good grade. And so it sort of like cemented that idea that the rules don't apply to me. Like I don't have to do the things that other people do. Like I don't have to pay parking tickets. I didn't pay taxes once for like 10 years. And it caught up with me, right, obviously. But I always thought that the rules for were like for suckers, and I didn't have to do that. And I got up to school, and same thing, I didn't want to do the things. Like I didn't want to read the books, and I didn't really want to work that hard. Plus, I had this like, you know, divorce sadness, whatever, and so it like gave me this perfect excuse to not do very well, which I didn't, and I left after a semester. And I went back to the University of Georgia, and of course, the same things followed me there, right? And Georgia's a huge campus. And you have to so you drive to a parking structure, and then a giant bus takes you to like whatever building your class is in. And I was so offended at the idea that I had to take 2 modes of transportation to get somewhere that I didn't even want to be. And like, it's not that big of a deal to take a bus and to take a car, but I didn't want to do that, you know? I didn't feel like doing that. And all of that seemed like it was too much for me. And again, the rules don't apply to me. Like I remember once I was always late, and I would park on the sidewalk because I was late, like literally the sidewalk next to a vending machine. And after, I don't know, 5 times of doing this, I came back, and of course my car was towed, obviously. But again, like I remember calling, and I had like a kick and Southern accent back then. And I remember I called, and the guy answered, and I was like, "Y'all take my car." And the guy was like, "Excuse me, what building is this?" But like that was my attitude, like y'all took my car, not I parked next to a vending machine on a literal sidewalk, and these are like the consequences of my actions, right? And so again, that idea stayed with me. And I say that because lots of people's parents get divorced, and they go to college, and they are sad, and they make it work. And I had used that as an excuse for like a really long time. But if we look a little bit deeper, there's like all these other characteristics that I am actually responsible for. So that happened. And another characteristic of addiction is delusions of grandeur. And I decided that it would be easier for me to move to Hollywood at 22 years old by myself and win an Oscar rather than complete my degree in English at the University of Georgia. I genuinely believed that that was like my path, and that that would be easier for me and way more rewarding, obviously, than taking that stupid bus to school. So I decided I'm gonna go be a famous actress, and I don't need a degree. So I took a year off from going to school, and I started bartending. And something really important happened while I was bartending, which is that I tried cocaine for the first time. And when I did coke for the first time, all of that sadness was just gone. Like it was not in me at all. You couldn't even find it. And I would think for a second, like, Laura's nodding. And I would think for a second, like, okay, try to make yourself sad. And I couldn't. And I remember thinking like, okay, so I can do life like this. I can't do life the other way, but I can do life like this. It also, another hallmark of addiction is I always felt like I wasn't really who I wanted to be growing up. I wanted to be cool. I wanted to be like a cool girl, and I wasn't. And on Coke, I was super cool. And I was funny, and I was friendly, and I was like a girl's girl, because I was the grumpiest bartender on earth. And like, if you came in and asked me what I thought you should get, I was talking about this with Addie the other day, I'd be like, I don't know, what do you like? I don't care, you know? But on Coke, I was like, I don't know, what do you like? Let me make you this, let me make you that. And I was like a girl's girl, and I liked it when the sororities came in, and all these things. And so I did my plan, I saved up money, and I moved to LA. And I was actually thinking about this earlier today, like when you're a young woman or man in the middle of a mental health crisis and an escalating drug problem, like moving to LA is not the move, is not the solution. But you know, there I went anyways, and I get to LA. And again, the same things follow me, right? Like the rules don't apply. For example, to get into, I'm sure some of you guys saw that there was like the strike recently with the Writers Guild and SAG. So to be an actor, you have to be in the Screen Actors Guild. You have to. It's just a rule. And there's two ways to get into the Screen Actors Guild. One is what 99.999% of people do. And it's a bit of a process, and it takes a few years, but it gets you in, and you have to be patient, and you have to be broke. Or there's a magical secret option number two, which is that some studio executive has to decide that only you are uniquely qualified for this project, and they put you in for free. And I literally think the last person who got that was like Marilyn Monroe. And I for sure thought like, well, I will be the second one then, because I'm not gonna do the thing that takes years and takes patience. I'm not gonna do that. So like same stuff, right? Like the rules don't apply to me, and I don't wanna do the things. And I was there for a long time. Well, I was there for 8 years. It's not that long. I was there for 8 years. And a lot happens, right, during that time. But like, basically, what matters is that over time, the drug use escalated. And the last 3 years of my living there was a complete nightmare for me and like anyone else that knew me. But something else really important happened in those last years so I was forced, literally forced, to get certified to teach spin. And I say forced because I wasn't going to. I'd gotten a job at a spin studio, just working the front desk for a minimum wage, because I had this hustle where I thought about like, maybe I shouldn't disclose this anymore, but whatever, I'm going to. I had this hustle on the state of California where I would get like unemployment plus minimum wage somewhere and not record it, whatever. So one of my little hustles was going. So I'm working the desk at the studio, and the owner said, okay, so you get to do our certification. It starts next week, because typically the only reason somebody worked there was to do the certification. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm good on that, actually. I'm going to be a famous actress. And by now I'm 29 with no acting jobs, but I'm like, I'm going to be famous. I don't actually need to teach here. And she was like, okay, let me say it differently. You have to get certified if you want to work here. And I was like, fuck, all right, fine. So I do the thing. I do the boot camp. It's 3 weeks. And during that 3 weeks, I fall in love with teaching spin and teaching fitness. And I'm like really good at it. And the reason I add that here is that I felt for a long time that I would like miss my fate, and I would like miss my calling, you know, and that I would age out of it, and that I was supposed to have already done something that I didn't do. And if anybody else in here has that fear, I just want to say that like, I have learned that we can't miss our calling. It will find us, and it might not be in our own timing, but like the universe will rise up and present in front of you what you actually need. So if anybody is fearful that you've missed your calling, you can't. And even in the midst of my madness, somebody forced me to get certified. And my one note was, because I was like chain smoking cigarettes, my one note when I like did the little final test, she was like, okay, so 2 things. One, we definitely need to work on your breathing. And then also, like, I can see you smoking weed on Abbott Kinney sometimes, which means that clients probably can. So if you could go like back behind one of the bars, that would be awesome. And I was like, got it. Yes, fine, sure. And in the midst of that, I like got certified, and it's something that has ultimately changed my life. And I liked it. I got a job right away teaching at the Beverly Hills Country Club, and like all these doors opened for me fairly easily. But I was still a train wreck cocaine addict. And cocaine bad is very, very different from heroin bad, though, which I will say. And cocaine bad for me looked like finishing that boot camp, teaching for like a year, and then I no-show enough times that they finally fire me. So like I'm in this like half-life where it feels like I'm okay because things are sort of getting done, and that's what that looked like for me. So ultimately, all those things kind of run out. My car blows up. All the head gaskets blow at once, which is a feeling that like I know immediately when it happens. I've had so many cars where all head gaskets blow at once. I know right away when it's happening. And yes, Kelly, I've done that to multiple cars. So I'm not changing the oil, so my car blows up. It's hard to live in LA when you don't have a car. I was in Venice and I was, working in Beverly Hills. Also, if I'm being honest, it was very difficult for me to live in LA anymore because like people in Venice did not like me. It was very difficult for me to walk down Abbot Kinney. A lot of people were mad at me all the time because everybody liked my boyfriend and I was like his train wreck girlfriend and whatever. So I thought, fine, time to get out of here. My mother by then, thank God, had moved to San Diego, thank God. So I moved in with my mother at 29 years old, which was awesome, with no car and no money. And I thought, cool, I'm gonna leave the drugs back home, or in LA, and start over. And what I didn't know about addiction then was that really the hallmark of that is a substance that takes me out of feeling the way that I am is problematic, which would include alcohol, but like I didn't know that yet. So I didn't make any moves to like go to a 12-step program or do anything like that. So I got some teaching jobs, and again, I'm like kind of good and I like it. And after a year of no shows, I get fired and like this cycle begins. And energetically, I feel like we attract to us what we are putting out and feeling, right? And that was true for me during those years. And again, this is like a long story. There's a lot of twists and turns here, but bottom line is I met a guy who, unbeknownst to me, had been and became, while we were together again, strung out on heroin. And when I say strung out, what I mean is, if anybody doesn't know, what that means typically is that if you don't do an opiate or do heroin within like 4 to 6 hours, you get deathly ill, like can't breathe sick, can't walk sick. And he was on heroin. And again, like the nuances here, like it's, years pass, but eventually I end up on heroin also, strung out also. My original goal was to help him get off the heroin because I was like, I used to be a coke addict and I'm fine now. But of course that didn't happen and I ended up on heroin. And the next 5 years of my life, I was either homeless or in a program or in jail. And I got arrested 5 times during that time. The last time was for strong arm robbery, and they were gonna give me a strike in California and send me to prison. And things just got like worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, right? And by the end, I'd been homeless for like a long time. And in January of 2015, I found myself living in a doghouse in my drug dealer's backyard in Oceanside. And it was more like, and I had somebody tell me this earlier, they're gonna think you mean a figurative doghouse, like I'm in the doghouse. I mean like an actual doghouse in his backyard. Actually, it was like a shed, and he would let his dog go in at night and sleep inside, and I could stay in the doghouse at night. And he would padlock me in from the outside, not so that I couldn't escape. It was actually more to like protect me, because this is a true story. His wife lived in the house, and he had let somebody else live back there before, and his wife was very unstable, and she literally like chased the girl down the street with a chainsaw. So it was to prevent me from yes, Isaac, this is true. So I'm in the doghouse, and by this time I'm also fully strung out on meth and heroin. And so like I'm living in this doghouse, and I had a compact with a light on it. If any of you guys know any addicts, or if this is something you're familiar with, sometimes we'd like pick our faces, and I was a picker. So I had a compact with a light on it so that I could pick my face in the dark, freezing my ass off, doing a San Diego reader, the crossword puzzle in the reader, because I was trying to keep my brain like firing. And so occasionally I'd see one outside of 7-Eleven and be like, oh my God, I need that, like make sure I can still read. So I'm like doing my reader, picking my face, it's a whole scene. And I remember stopping and thinking like, oh my God, like I went to college kind of. I did well on my SATs, and I am 34, living in a doghouse, hoping that I don't get murdered by a chainsaw. Like this happened, this is my life, this happened. And hence, all the plans that was probably a moment when I was like, I should have invented spin and none of this would have happened, you know? And like, those are the moments when I'd be like, my God, like I should have done things so differently. How did this happen? And the last night that I was there, a friend of mine who is a Marine, actually a US Marine, and he would be out of town. We'd been roommates when I was clean in San Diego, and he would be, you know, over in Afghanistan and come back. He would like do different tours and come back. And he would always check on me and like make sure I was alive and try to help me. And by then, my mom would actually pay for me to have a phone so that she knew where I was. So I did have a phone, fortunately. And my friend called me and I answered. And he said, hey, I'm back. And I'm out at 29 Palms, actually. What are you doing? And I said, I am living in a doghouse in Oceanside, and I think I'm gonna die. And he said, okay, sorry. He was like, that's it. If I come to get you, will you come with me and let me help you? And I said, yeah, I'll go with you. And I remember he was like, no funny shit. And I remember the reason he said that is because I had like robbed this person. Like one time he came to help me and I was in the car and I saw like cash in his wallet and I grabbed it and like jumped out of the car and ran barefoot, like full on like crackhead, like running through this, like into PCH, running away with his cash, you know? And he was like, no funny shit if I come get you. And I was like, I promise I will not rob you. I will just get in the car peacefully. And I did. And so there's a Burger King on Mission. And I watched the Burger King the next day, and he came and got me and brought me to 29 Palms, and I kicked heroin for the last time. And I drank for another like 10 days after I got there. So my actual sobriety date is January 15th, 2015. So God willing, in 2 months, I will have 9 years off of that lifestyle, like clean and sober. And done with that lifestyle. And this part's gonna be really hard because my friend is here. So right before I went into that doghouse, I tell this so many times when you're not there and I don't cry, but you're here. So right before I went into the doghouse, I did one thing. So I used to get on people's phones because I had a flip phone, and I would go online and I would do a couple of things. One, I would look at Facebook, and all my friends were like married and buying houses and going to law school and all the things. But also, I would look at people that were hiring teachers. And the thing that like made me the saddest, I think, was that I thought I was never going to teach again, you know? And that was really like the saddest thing for me, was that I was never going to teach fitness again, like seemingly. And so I don't know what possessed me, but right before I moved into the doghouse, I saw an ad on Craigslist for somebody looking for a spin teacher. And I sent this woman an email. And I got back. And while I was out there, I was doing all the things. And this isn't really like about 12-step, but on the case that anybody in here like knows an addict or is, you know, in recovery or is interested in this kind of thing, what's really important is 12-step stuff, right? In my opinion. And I was doing all those things while I was there. And I had been in and out of the recovery world for a long time. And I used to think of my relapses as like these major failures. And I wasn't getting consecutive days in a row, that's true. But every time I was in, I was learning more and I was gathering resources, and they were there when I was ready to execute on those. And so what I was doing while I was there was I already had a sponsor, right? My friend Rachel, she's amazing. She's been my sponsor for like 10 years. I'm calling her every day. And I knew people that owned sober livings. So while I was there, I had a couple of friends arrange to get me into a sober living, which was a miracle because I lived in this sober living twice before and he'd had to kick me out twice before. And again, he was like, all right, I'll let her live here. No funny shit, same thing. And I'm like, no, you know, I won't sell heroin out of the laundry room again, I promise. And he was like, fine. So he said that I could go back and stay in the living room. And he was like, I'm gonna test you every single day. And we'll see if you can even get like 5 days or whatever. I was like, okay, great. So, and then of course he also said, and you need to get a job while you're here. And I had sent an email right before I moved into the doghouse. And I said, I wonder if that girl would talk to me again. And of course, anyone that knows her knows that, like, of course she would. So I followed up with the person that owned this studio and said, hey, I'm back. I actually told her a ridiculous lie, and which she now knows. And I said, I'm back. Could I come back and audition for you again? And she said, sure, of course. So, I went and auditioned, and I got the gig. And I started like the next Saturday. And some of the women that were in that first class were like in this room, which is so crazy. This is so much harder with you guys here. Normally I don't actually cry my whole way through it. But anyways, so I started teaching again, and I'm on the couch in this sober living. And at about like 90 days in, I had a birthday, and I was turning 35. And I just kept thinking like, so I had definitely no checking account. I wasn't allowed to get a checking account for a long time because like, I overdrew an account and didn't pay it or whatever. So like none of the banks will let you go there. So I'm going to check cashing places and no ID. I couldn't get a license. I owed a bunch of money from an old DUI and some other things. And like everything was just a mess. And I lived on this couch, and I'm taking the bus to this studio and teaching. And I just kept thinking like, my God, like, I can't believe that this is where I am at 35. I was going to be like a lawyer, I was going to do all these things. And in recovery, the people around you will be like, yeah, but you're clean, man. And I remember being like, yeah, that's not really doing it for me right now, though, because like, this is not, I just kept thinking that if like the ghost of Christmas future had like floated into the hallway at my high school and had stopped me and been like, hey, Janine, I have a crystal ball here. Do you want to see where you're going to be at 35? I'd been like, totally, yes, absolutely. I'm sure I'm going to be married and rich and famous, like I don't know for what, but of course, show me. And if the ghost of Christmas future had been like, yeah, none of that's going to happen. But what you will have going for you is that you will have 90 days off of heroin that day, and that will be an amazing achievement for you at that time. I just couldn't, I would have thought like, this is the AP wing of the school. Like, this can't be right, And I just couldn't like get that out of my mind, And I was probably pretty close to like giving up on the whole gig, when I think about it. And my sober living was in Vista. And I went outside, and I was doing, so again, like the recovery things I was doing, and one of the things that we do is we meditate. And I was doing this meditation. Actually, a client at that studio had given me some Chopra meditations for free because she worked there. And I was doing one. And I went outside, and I was doing this meditation, and there was like a couch on the back deck, and I would like smoke the butts of other people's cigarettes. So I'm like smoking someone else's cigarette, doing this gratitude meditation. And the phrase that they had us like focus on was, gratitude unlocks the fullness of life and makes what we have enough and more. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life and makes what we have enough and more. And I did the thing, and I was like breathing for 20 minutes, and I got done, and I like took my headphones out, and I was overcome with gratitude that I wasn't dope sick, we call it. 35, I was going to be like a lawyer, I was going to do all these things. And in recovery, the people around you will be like, yeah, but you're clean, man. And I remember being like, yeah, that's not really doing it for me right now, though, because like, this is not, I just kept thinking that if like the ghost of Christmas future had like floated into the hallway at my high school and had stopped me and been like, hey, Janine, I have a crystal ball here. Do you want to see where you're going to be at 35? I'd been like, totally, yes, absolutely. I'm sure I'm going to be married and rich and famous, like I don't know for what, but of course, show me. And if the ghost of Christmas future had been like, yeah, none of that's going to happen. But what you will have going for you is that you will have 90 days off of heroin that day, and that will be an amazing achievement for you at that time. I just couldn't, I would have thought like, this is the AP wing of the school. Like, this can't be right, And I just couldn't like get that out of my mind, And I was probably pretty close to like giving up on the whole gig, when I think about it. And my sober living was in Vista. And I went outside, and I was doing, so again, like the recovery things I was doing, and one of the things that we do is we meditate. And I was doing this meditation. Actually, a client at that studio had given me some Chopra meditations for free because she worked there. And I was doing one. And I went outside, and I was doing this meditation, And there was like a couch on the back deck, and I would like smoke the butts of other people's cigarettes. So I'm like smoking someone else's cigarette, doing this gratitude meditation. And the phrase that they had us like focus on was gratitude unlocks the fullness of life and makes what we have enough and more. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life and makes what we have enough and more. And I did the thing, and I was like breathing for 20 minutes, and I got done, and I like took my headphones out, and I was overcome with gratitude that I wasn't dope sick, we call it. And dope sick means you have to get heroin or an opiate of some sort within like 4 to 6 hours. Otherwise, you're like on the ground, literally. And it's an awful cycle to live in. You know, you can't do anything, you know, like you can't go anywhere, you can't travel, you can't have friends, because you have to get well within, you know, you have to find $20 within 4 hours, like no matter what it takes. And it's an awful cycle to live in. And I had been living in it for a very long time. And I opened my eyes and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm not like dope sick right now, you know, like I'm fine. And I remember looking down and feeling like very happy and healthy in my body, you know, and I was like, oh, like, thank you, you know, for getting me this far. And then I looked up and I saw that there was this like beautiful view off the deck of my sober living. And I had considered my sober living very like rundown. And I saw this mountain and I thought, wow, that's so beautiful. Followed pretty quickly by the thought that like, well, that didn't just get there while I was meditating. Like that's been there. Why couldn't I see that? I have never seen that view before in my life, and I've lived here a bunch. And then I realized that that moment of gratitude for not being sick had like cracked my heart open enough, just enough, that I could be present in the moment and see that. Followed by, oh my gosh, did my heroin addiction like leave me more grateful? You know, did I just like get the gift of gratitude from that? You know, this thing that I have been so ashamed of and so embarrassed of. Like, because if I'm really being honest, long before I was on heroin, I didn't see views. The girl in high school didn't notice views, you know? And I saw that, and I started in that moment, and like this was a process, but I started in that moment to like let go of some of my shame and regret about what had happened, because I felt, and what I was feeling in that moment, and I learned this later, what I was feeling was post-traumatic growth. And most people are familiar with post-traumatic stress, right? But there is a third phenomenon. This is not my theory. This is an actual psychological phenomenon, which is called post-traumatic growth. And like when men and women are going overseas to fight, they're told before they leave, okay, you got 2 ways of coming back. 1 is status quo, the way that you are. 2 is damaged. And we're looking for status quo. We're going to prepare you to be status quo, and that's what we're going to work on. But there's a third way back from trauma that isn't talked about nearly as much. And you can come back from a trauma actually better. And the reason for this is that typically we feel like physically strong and resilient after we survive something. And this doesn't have to be living in a doghouse, right? This can be an illness. This can be the loss of a job, bankruptcy, the loss of a loved one. Like this can be so many things that we think break us. But when we survive and we get through, we feel physically and emotionally and spiritually stronger and more resilient. We typically have more gratitude for like the people in our lives, for our relationships, for our friendships, for our family members, because we almost, you know, lost them. And we often have a spiritual connection of some sort, right? Where we feel connected to something outside of ourselves. And most of all, if nothing else, we can now help someone else going through that same thing, right? Which is like a beautiful gift to have. And to be able to walk someone else through something that you are uniquely qualified to walk them through, right? Because of what you've gone through. And that's what I was feeling in that moment. I was feeling post-traumatic growth. And right along with that was, you know, that teaching job that I had. I was so different with that job this time because I had almost lost it. And the very end of me living in LA, I had a boyfriend who was mad at me like all the time for doing coke, which was fair. and we were fighting. And this is like insanely ironic when I'm about to tell you that I said all these things. It's a true story. But he was like giving me a hard time. And I remember standing in our house in Venice, and I was like, look, man, you are seriously overreacting, okay? It's not like I'm shooting heroin. I've never been arrested. I haven't lost the car. Like, we haven't lost the house. Like, it's fine. It's coke. And I remember he just kind of stopped, and he was like, you're right, Janine. None of those things have happened. You're right. And you're slick enough and you're smart enough that you might be able to go the rest of your life without any of those things happening. But what will happen is that you're sick 3 days out of 7. You're always about to get fired. You're always broke. It's always like weird with your dad because he kind of knows, but not really. But worst of all, you'll have to live your life knowing you're not the woman you were supposed to be. But you're right, you could do that. This was years before this moment on the deck. But the teaching that I was doing when I was like just good enough and I was just sort of managing was me living like a half-life, right? And heroin took that off the table for me and forced me to make a choice. Because he was right. I could have done that half-life forever. I could have drank a little too much and done like a little blow here and there and had a job for 18 months at a time, right? And just moved around. And it took that away from me and left me with the choice of the fullness of life. And that finished my total gratitude. I was so embarrassed. For me to stand here and it says heroin right there, and I have a whole podcast about it, like I was so embarrassed. I didn't want anyone to know what happened. And to get to the point where not only am I okay with it, I'm like so proud of all of that and all the things that it gave me. And that's what was starting to happen. And what was also happening in that time was because I was able to like step into the fullness of my life as a fitness instructor, I was giving it so much more. And so I started learning week after week. I was bringing like more than just the workout, right? And I would start to do these like lessons in my classes based on things that I was learning in recovery. And so I started to like read personal development books and growth books and, read more about fitness. And I learned that there is so much more that we can do with our lives through fitness and through moving our bodies to like prepare for the future, because that foundational step of reconciling the past, that in and of itself is a beautiful thing, right? And like just getting there. And if there's even one person in here right now that can say like, yeah, okay, I get it. That thing that I thought would break me, that didn't, like maybe I'm okay with that, Maybe it left me who I am right here in this chair. If one person feels that way, great. And like we could leave it there, but we don't have to, because for free in your own body, we have all of the tools at our disposal to continue growing and to continue preparing for the future and to continue developing our lives, right? Looking for that fullness of life. And so there's a couple of things I want to talk about with you guys, specifically with fitness. So the first one is this. So if your legs are crossed, I want you guys to uncross your legs and sit up straight. We're going to do something together. Dana, Akoa. So sit up nice and straight. You can cross your legs back in a second. Sit up straight. I want you to drop your shoulders, lift your chin, close your eyes, relax your jaw. We're going to do something called box breathing. So I'm going to guide you through this. I want you to inhale for 4 counts through your nose. Draw in. Hold it for 4, 3, 2, 1. And then exhale slow through the mouth for 4. And leave the exhale out for 4, 3, 2, 1. Now again, deep inhale in for 4. Hold 4, 3, 2, and then exhale and leave the exhale out, and then open your eyes. Doesn't that feel better, right? And more like centered in the moment? Also, every single one of you just did that, and I've done this before, and there's always a few people like refusing, and every single one of you just did it. So I thank you for that. I've never had an entire room of cooperation, so that's amazing. Go Cougars. So anyways, box breath, right? Box breath is a tool that you have at any time for free. And what we just did was we lowered your blood pressure. And so anxiety, stress, my students in here, when you're studying, right? Like you have that tool at your disposal. It's very simple, box breath. If you forget it, you can Google it later. So there's that. So we start there, and that's like the most like basic thing that we can do. Now, from there, I want to give you guys some really specific things as well. So, and if you are someone that has never worked out one day in your life, ever, and you're not like, the thought of being like a gym person is horrifying, which it was to me, which is fair. You actually have more of an advantage, because something else that I know now is that self-esteem is like a thermostat, and we have like a set point that we give ourselves based on things like living in a doghouse or not finishing college or whatever. And so we can set our self-esteem thermostat at like 60 degrees. And the problem is we're not ever going to get anything. We're not going to get results that exceed what we believe we deserve. And so one of the things that we can do with our bodies is like consciously increase our self-esteem thermostat over time. And that knowledge of the past, right? That's a start. That's definitely a start. But I want more. So if you are someone that has never done something like this applies to you even more, because tomorrow you could jog to your car and for the first time try something new and move your body and get like 10 degrees. Because one of the pillars of self-esteem is the belief that we can learn something new, not mastery, just learn it. So like the students here, you guys all with your tuition have access to the fitness center. And there's like machines in there. If you have never walked through that door once and you walk in tomorrow and you get on a machine and they're in the hallway, so this is gonna increase your self-esteem even more, right? Like get on one, read the instructions and start going. That right there, 10 degrees up, right? So don't be afraid to start. You actually have an advantage, right? If you've never done any type of movement in your life, you have an advantage. So one of the best ways to hack this is through dopamine and serotonin, which sounds fancy, but it's not. So marking something off is very simple. Marking something off. So say you want to move your body like 5 times this week out of 7, and you have a calendar or something on your phone. Knowing that you're going to mark off your days as you do them, some sort of visual goal that you're working to. So you're going to walk outside for 10 minutes, 5 days. And you've got a calendar on your wall. Knowing that you're going to do that releases dopamine. And dopamine makes us feel excited. It makes us feel driven. It's the chemical of achievement. It helps with digestion. It helps with creativity, innovation. All of these benefits come from releasing dopamine into your system. And it is free to check something off. Or like at my studio, which is right down the street, I teach spin very near here. We're doing a Halloween challenge. And I love these challenges. And I know it might seem to the clients like it's a little bit silly or whatever, but it's not, because we're gonna have all the poster boards up on the wall and everybody gets to walk out of class and like mark their thing. And so what we're doing is in class, like they have dopamine knowing that their team is like gonna get an extra point for them. So we hack that knowing that you're gonna track this, or if you're on one of those machines and you say, all right, I'm gonna go to 15 minutes. You watch the thing go, go, go. You'll feel as soon as you get to minute 12, you'll feel that like excitement. It's like a natural high. And then when you actually do the mark, when you put it down, that releases serotonin. And serotonin is a mood stabilizer. It helps with calmness. It helps with memory and cognition. And so that dopamine takes us up, and then the serotonin gives us that calming boost. And what that is a very natural like antidepressant for free in your brain that you can hack just by moving. And then another benefit, I actually just learned this, another benefit is that those two things working together also leave you feeling very like cooperative and affectionate with people in your life. Like they can promote those feelings, which is why the people that you work out with sometimes feel like they're your closest friends in the world, because we are actually like sharing those transmitters like while we're working out. But it doesn't have to be somebody you work out with. It can be, you know, you go home and you see your partner and you're going to have that increased feeling of affection, cooperation. So it enhances our relationships too. So just that, tracking something and going. The second thing that we can do is, so there's something in fitness called an interval. And an interval is very simple. It's just moving, working like a little bit harder for a period of time, like 15 seconds or so. In fact, again, my studio, which is very near here, the whole thing is based on intervals. So we're on the bikes, right? And we'll go like a little bit faster and then we recover. And then we go a little bit faster and then we recover. And that would be an interval. You can do it if you're walking and you just run like a little bit faster. And the amazing thing about intervals, they do so many things for you, but I limited them to 3. But one of the things that they do is that they help build resilience, because your brain doesn't actually know the difference between an interval on the bike and the doghouse, actually. It just knows stress, recovery, stress, recovery. That's what it knows. And so we're developing that neuro pathway of recovery and resilience. And so in that way, we can put ourselves under stress in a controlled environment for a certain period of time, and we're building resilience over and over and over again without having to have something like traumatic happen, right, to get stronger. And so those moments of resilience are preparing us for, the cycle of challenge, which, obviously at some point, like, we will encounter another one, and we can stay prepared that way. It also teaches us to react on the fly and to stay on your path, even in a conflict, even when there's challenge, right? So like my students in my classes, they don't know when I'm gonna call one. They don't know when I'm gonna tell them to go faster. They just have to respond. And they don't know when it's over either. I mean, they do, but not really. And then they just get to come back down. And so when you have to appropriately make a decision on the fly under pressure to quit or stay on your fight, that's what we're getting in those intervals. And you doing them on your own too, same thing. When you decide I'm gonna go, and when you come back down, it is teaching you to make decisions under pressure and to stay flexible. And then the third thing that intervals do for us is they help regulate cortisol. And when we can regulate cortisol, we sleep better. So, and obviously, again, for my students in here, well, I guess I don't know. You guys are doing a challenge I couldn't do by staying in school, but I think it's hard. Sleeping, obviously, is something that we have to focus on. And so all of those things help regulate cortisol and help you do that. So with the combination of those couple of things, right, the box breathing, and you guys all have, and I double checked this, all of the students in here with your tuition have access to the fitness center and classes. They're group classes. And I highly recommend group classes. I love group classes. Even if you just go and like watch one, just going there, getting a feel for it, find something that you like, taking a group class and meeting people that way, like some of my favorite people on earth, most of my favorite people I met at this studio and Encinitas, that saved my life. So the box breath, trying something new, and the intervals. And the combination of these things that I've spoken about tonight, the reconciliation of the past, and the work that we can do physically to help prepare for the future, do something that's really, really important. Because when we are stuck in regret about the past and all the things that didn't happen or happened and shouldn't have, and anxiety about the future, it's very, very, very hard to experience the present moment. And there's a lot of beauty and joy in the present moment. And you guys know how it goes, right? It's the human condition to say, when I get this, then I will be happy. When this happens, then I will be happy. And that it's the hedonic treadmill. It just keeps moving the goalposts a little bit further and a little bit further. And to some extent, that's always going to happen, right? That's kind of just how human beings are made. But when we're on that treadmill, we can miss so much of the beauty that's just in our lives, like that view that I had missed. Because if I'm really, really honest, that younger version of me that wanted to be a lawyer, I wouldn't trade places with her at all, at all. I don't think she was going to help anybody. I wanted to be a divorce lawyer. After my parents got divorced, I was like, fine, I'll make money off of other people's misery. That was like my goal in life, And now I would never, as beautiful as Cal San Marcos is, now I wouldn't go back and say I want to be a bottle girl and invent spin. I would do everything the exact same way that I did and learn all the things that I learned. And so what I hope to share with you guys tonight is those two things, that we can grow from our past, and those challenges can allow us to step into our alignment with our purpose, right? And live and be like the fullest versions of ourselves. And through your body and through your own health and wellness, we can prepare for the future. And that positive past and a compelling future is the key to a serene present moment where we can see the beauty of like my friends coming to see me, like Monica, I can't believe you're here. Thank you for being here, and when we're focused on the next thing, it's very hard to see that. And so hopefully I've left you guys with a way to get a little bit more into the present moment and hopefully inspired to use the fitness center if you're a student here. And I think we have questions, right, too?
Thank you, Janine. I want to just take a moment and tell Janine, thank you for just being so open and sharing your story personally. And I know that it's a lot. And I think, again, with hoping and seeing the challenge, right? It's truly a story of survival. And thank you for giving back so meaningfully to others. I think just remember that if you're a student here and wherever you are on your journey, right, like know the community of support that is here at Cal State San Marcos, and we want you to invest in that and know that we are here and committed to your success. And at times you're going to face challenge, but make sure that you look and take a step towards the wonderful resources that are here in that community. It's really an envelope of support, and really, if you're here as a community member, you know that the challenges in life continue to evolve and continue to take place. And myself personally, I have addiction in my genes, and going to something that sounds maybe silly if you've never been in a cycling room, right? But like to think of the challenge equal to the challenge that you're facing in life, whether it's a lost loved one, right? Or a conflict with a good friend, right? There are things of empowerment, right? And being able to build that confidence and see that you can be resilient and achieve success. So I want to invite anyone that has any questions to come to the center here. I think we have a few last minutes.
Okay.
I'll start with the first one, Janine, if I may. I think I'm sure on your experiences with addiction, right? You mentioned you were kind of involved in fitness, right?
Yes.
Probably connected with lots of individuals, right? So can you assume, looking back now, is there something that a bystander or a good friend could have done differently to help you support and find that recovery any sooner?
That's a really good question. Honestly, probably not. Usually the way that works is that, in fact, it even says, and not to be like an AA nerd, but I'm kind of an AA nerd, in the Alcoholics Anonymous book, it says that frothy emotional appeals get us nowhere, meaning family members. And so typically it is on the person, the individual, to get to a place where we decide, like, I want something different. I want something better, and I want to change. What I can recommend is for someone that is close to someone that is potentially using, is to try to take care of yourself as best you can and do what is comfortable in your spirit and soul. Like if they ask you for something, what are you comfortable with? Because it's going to be impossible to figure out what's going to work for them. No one knows. They don't even know. But what you can do is say, like, can I live with, telling this person, no, I can't give you any money, or can I not live with that, right? I will say though that just simply, so my clients at the Beverly Hills Country Club, they didn't really know what was going on. I mean, maybe, but they were so amazing with support of like what I could do, like my talent, that it did keep me going. And so I think just like the human connection of recognizing someone's talent around you, maybe they're an addict going through something, maybe they're not, just being told that from those people that like I was doing a good job and they liked my music kept me going. Now I was managing this crazy turmoil and chaos, but I think that that's just best practices too, and I try to do that. Like if I work with someone, say like, you're doing a very good job at, X, Y, and Z. So not really probably like to get me anywhere on the sobriety journey, but just keeping like my hopes up and my spirits up by just recognizing, some of my talent and skill that I had as an instructor. I also want to say to you, because you brought up the studio, anyone that is in here is cordially invited to take a free spin class with me right down the street at Cycle Bar, San Alejo Hills. So if anybody wants to come take a class, we're right down there. Yes, exactly. There we go.
Questions?
Sorry, maybe I missed this part, but what happened to the Marine?
So that's actually a really good question. So he ended up retiring, and he lives in Vegas, and remained a very good friend of mine. Sorry, this thing fell out. Can you guys hear me if I just go through this? And remained a very good friend of mine. And I am very grateful to him for coming to get me that day, because that was certainly a moment when somebody would have been told, don't go get her, which would have been fair. And that's why sometimes I get emotional when I talk about it, because thank God he did. So he lives in Vegas. He started a security company, and he does security for like casinos and stuff.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you for asking about him. I don't think anybody's ever asked about him, and he's great. So thank you.
Of course, I'm one of your students.
Hi.
But I've also been listening to your podcast, and knowing that you sort of stopped heroin so long ago now, it's
Yeah.
been over 8 years. what is your thought? I'm sure this is a very complicated answer, but in context of the current opioid crisis, sort of what's your, I'm sure you could talk all night about it, but sort of what's your thought on that? Like what's, what do you think? Do you see anything from the context of your view, having gone through what you've gone through, that you see that we're doing wrong, or some, some direction that needs to be taken, or some path that needs to be taken?
Yes, so that's a great question. So what I think would be helpful, and there are, and like you said, it's very complex and there's like so much that starts to get involved with this kind of thing. But the primary reason why an opiate addict of some sort doesn't stop is because we get deathly, insanely ill. And so like for me as a woman who is homeless, I can't be deathly, insanely ill walking around on the street in Oceanside. Like I'm not going to do that. And most people aren't going to do that. And I feel like there's a misinformed idea that like, well, somebody can like pick themselves up by their bootstraps and there's resources available. And that's not actually true. That's like a bit of an uninformed opinion. It's very, very hard to find treatment. If you have insurance, you can go immediately, but like the position that I was in and the position that most people are in when they're destitute is that you don't have health insurance. Like maybe your parents have kept you on their health insurance, but probably not. And I wasn't. So finding a detox is very, very difficult. So in my like perfect world, if I had become the first woman president, a medicated detox that is available for even 5 to 7 days and can go like get people would go a really long way in this problem. And that's not something that's available. In fact, when you want to get into detox, there's like a week, there's weeks long waits. It's very, very difficult. And the medication that they give you to make it more comfortable is not super expensive. Like this is a possible thing. So a medicated, 5 to 7 day detox. And then once you're there, you can be given the resources for meetings or like whatever your next step is. But starting with that detox that's available would be a very helpful thing.
Probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Thank you for sharing your experiences. And my question is, what are other techniques that you use personally to stay
Stopped.
to stay alert and be engaged in present time? Because I have a tendency to go back there and I remember and feel what's bad.
Yeah.
But then I want to be at present time, but also I don't want to be over projecting what could be. So my challenge for me is, as a mother, as a daughter, as a student, as a professional, I'm going, what else can I do to stay still and accept and be in the moment? It's a loaded question, but I struggle with it now and then. But then I have a daughter that always puts me in check. She goes, Mom, where are you right now? And I actually have to look at myself, physically remind myself, where am I? So anyway, that's my loaded question.
No, that's a great question. And I struggle with that too, a lot. I think that everybody does and everybody always will. Again, it's one of those things that's like part of the human condition, but we can work on it, And so that breath technique actually that I shared is really good to help get you present in the moment. Also, if you can, depending on where you are, getting your feet outside of your shoes, putting them on the ground so I can hear it's carpet, and taking a second with your eyes closed to feel, like getting tactile, feeling the carpet underneath your feet, feeling what's next to you. Like if I were sitting in this chair, I could feel that chair, looking around and trying to find like 5 colors around you. So basically anything that's going to get you very present in the environment through tactile cueing or visual cueing. So looking for colors, feeling where you are, noticing the sounds. Like if we all close our eyes right now, you can hear the air conditioner a little bit. So like if you close your eyes and listened for that, like even like the hum of a refrigerator, all of those things in the moment pretty immediately can get you back in to where you want to be. And then for like long-term maintenance of that, for me, fitness and working out is my best solution for that, because it's very hard when I'm teaching to be somewhere else. I've done it when I'm super stressed out, but it's hard. But in the moment, that tactile cueing and picking out some colors should get you back present in the moment.
Hello.
Hi.
So I kind of have like a two-part question.
Okay.
The first part is I want to say that you said you're on your track to 9 years of sobriety so far.
Yes, ma'am.
During that 9 years, has anyone from your past tried to like contact you, been like, hey, like let's go do drugs, or like has any of them been like, hey, like I know you've got yourself on track, like I want to get myself on track as well? And my other question was, you talked a little about like your practices with like helping soothe like the breathing techniques, but have you ever seeked out any like mental health support for your addictions?
So again, also really good questions. So one of the things that I did this time that was different, because I had tried to get sober many, many, many times, and I could never get more than like 90 days. And one of the things I did that was different this time was I deleted all of my contacts of anybody I did used to know, and I never really wanted to do that. I would say it was because they were like my friend, but really it was just in case I wanted to like, get high again for sure. But I actually deleted those contacts. I would block people on Facebook. And honestly, most of the people that I knew were homeless, no phones. A lot of them are in prison now. Like it was, the odds of them even like being able to find me now are very slim. So occasionally somebody from like a rehab that isn't doing well would reach out, somebody that I met in recovery, and be like, oh my God, you're doing so good, whatever. And like, we'll, have a little bit of conversation. But I've actually never had anybody reach out and like invite me back into the fold. Actually, like one of my favorite stories to share is in that sober living that I lived in. The guy that owned it, Steve, was like so amazingly helpful, and like so much of what I know, I learned from him. And right away, like the second week I was back, I saw someone in McDonald's who did actually offer me a shot of heroin. So that happened once, I guess, at one time. And because I was trying to get clean in the areas that I had used in. And he saw me and he was like, where you been? And I was like, oh, I don't know, around. And he was like, well, get your ass in here, because we would use the bathroom to get high. And he was like, get your ass in here, I got a shot ready for you. And I was like, okay, I'll be right back, because like I didn't want to be rude. And I ran up the hill to my sober living. It was right there. And the guy, Steve, was standing outside. And I ran up to him and I was like, oh my God. And he was like a known guy in the area. And I was like, I just saw so-and-so. And he offered me a shot. Who just turns down free heroin? It was free heroin. Like I should go back. And he was like, that isn't free. What does that cost you in your lifetime? That's like the worst return on investment I've ever seen a human being make. It's not free. It's definitely not free for you. And he yelled at me a little bit, and then I went up to my room and he followed me up into my apartment and he was like, I'm not done with you. And I was like, Steve, listen, before you give me a hard time, if somebody offered you, he'd been a crack addict. I was like, if somebody offered you crack, you would like stop and think about it for a second, right? And he cut me off and he was like, no, that would never happen to me, because I've taken a stand in this community and people know who I am, and that would never happen to me. And you were engaged in a criminal lifestyle for so long, you have to take a stand all the way on the other side. And that is when I deleted all of those contacts. And I was like, I need to like be the person in the rehab that it's like, don't tell Janine, she's gonna tell on you. You know what I mean? Like I had to be that person and take that stand. And I think that's probably pretty clear to anyone that I used to use with. But again, like they didn't have the resources to find me or call me, like for the most part. So, I haven't actually run into that. And the second question, yeah, absolutely. I've done like EDM therapy since I've been sober, like not right away, because obviously therapy like costs money, and it's kind of expensive, and it was a while before I had, insurance, when I did happen to have insurance. So I have done a little bit of that, totally. I think it's a really good idea sometimes, because along with the use comes a lot of, trauma and some extra circumstances that can leave us suffering mentally. So I have done a little, but most addicts in recovery do, if they have the ability to also seek, we call it outside help beyond 12-step.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank everyone for their questions, for their time, and respectfully, we're going to transition, and I hope that Janine can stay at the end and maybe answer any questions we didn't quite get to.